and Madam Speaker. Tonight we're actually going to sort of continue on the theme. I'm going to try to dial back sounding like a jerk tonight, but I've been trying to make a point on the scale of the debt, the level we're at, the misunderstanding on its growth, and some potential solutions. We're also going to spend a little bit of time tonight, and this is what I was sort of pre-apologizing for. I'm going to show that some of my brothers and sisters' ideas from the left on raise this tax, do this, do that, don't even count as rounding errors. And so let's actually start with some of the boards here. I've shown this a half dozen times, and I keep showing it because this is what I have bad dreams about. Yeah, if you live in a world of math, and I know this is functionally a math-free zone, but when we finished the debt ceiling deal, we basically got some applause by economists saying, oh, guys, you basically moved yourself from maybe 120 to maybe 115% of debt to GDP at the end of the 9 years. Okay, so that was the CBO number. But then some of the outside economists came in. Moody's Analytics said, hey, guys, there's other things going on. The higher interest rates, the dramatic increase in spending in Medicare. Remember, the first 7 months of this year, we spent 16% more on Medicare. Next year's interest will functionally be $750 billion. $750 billion. We weren't supposed to hit numbers like that for years. But the one that took my breath away was when the Bloomberg economists, and these aren't slouches, and they have a really good data system, said their model was coming back and saying, okay, higher interest rates, higher healthcare costs, lower labor force participation, some of the other things we don't talk about because it doesn't really fit our scenario. And I'm going to hyper simplify this, and I've done this a handful of times, but I'm trying to get the concept through. So as part of the deal, 6 weeks ago, the $700 billion that's in the non-defense discretionary, we're going to cut $100 billion of that. Okay, great. Bloomberg economists basically say the removal of that $100 billion, it's necessary. It also slows down the economy by about 0.5% of GDP. We don't seem to understand when we do policies like this, which we need to do, you also have to be adopting policies that backfill the growth. And this place can barely walk and chew gum. And that's why this number here was so terrifying when the Bloomberg economists are saying, hey, at functionally that 9-year window, 10 years from now, and what reason we say 9 years because we're already working on next year's budget and appropriations and spending, is 130% of debt to GDP, $51 trillion of borrowing, and if interest rates even go back to a somewhat more normal number, that's almost $2 trillion a year in interest. That's functionally 9 years from now. And we're going to do what? We're not going to talk about it. We're going to be just giddy that, hey, look at the hard work we did. We removed $100 billion out of discretionary. And let's see, this year, and I know my math is different than Congressional Budget Office, and come the end of September, we'll find out which one of us had a better calculator. But I've been right more times this year than they have. And I know that's boastful, but I can prove it, because go back and look at some of my floor speeches, and then we've gotten the quarterly reports from Treasury. I have this fiscal year us coming in around $1,820 to $840 billion of borrowing. Why is that important? The 2023 fiscal year discretionary, defense included, so defense and non-defense discretionary was supposed to be total spend, $1,836 billion, basically meaning every dime of what you think of as government is on borrowed money this year. When we go home and talk to our constituents, do we basically say, hey, do you know all of defense, all of the Supreme Court, all of the State Department, all of everything you think of as government is on borrowed money. Is that what we do? Because many times do we go home and we get someone who says, hey, we just got rid of foreign aid. And then I show them my chart that foreign aid's like 12 days of borrowing. And they just look at you with daggers saying, well, then it's waste and fraud. It's this. But the Democrats do something that drives me insane. If we just taxed rich people more. So I'm going to show you some boards here that basically show that's theater. It's not real math. So let's actually walk through some of the things going on right now. And I'm going to do back and forth on some of these boards. And there's going to be a reason why I'm doing it this way. I spent the last 2 weeks when I came to this microphone talking about obesity and diabetes. And that's a really dangerous thing sometimes to come and talk about. But diabetes is 33% of all U.S. healthcare. It's 31% of all Medicare spending. We need to talk about it. Our brothers and sisters in this country are dying. And we're afraid to talk about it. So I'm going to spend the first part here sounding like an economist on steroids, and I'm going to try to explain what the cost here, then I'm going to try to talk a little bit about just the simple morality of not doing anything here. So let's actually play a little bit of a game here. Estimated deficit reduction for 2023. If you actually were just to take on obesity-related illnesses this fiscal year, so we're using current math, $283 billion. Okay, well, remember, the Democrats' tax proposal, the president's tax proposal was, hey, we're going to go from 37% to 39% for top earners. Okay, stagnant number. None of these are dynamically scored on the effects on the economy, because if you made people healthier on this side, the economy would grow. When you raise people's taxes, the economy shrinks. But the stagnant number is $30 billion. So let's see, just obesity-related spending will be $283 billion this fiscal year to the taxpayers. And the Democrats, the president's tax hike, produces $30 billion. Did anyone see the insanity here? So we basically did the math for everyone, saying if Democrats would have to increase the top tax rate to 62% to raise the same amount of money as getting rid of obesity for people on government programs. Okay, that's uncomfortable to talk about, but think about that. You'd basically have to raise the top tax rate to 62% just to produce the revenues, receipts, for this population here. It's a different way. I'm struggling just trying to find a creative way to get people to think about that the path of having a healthier America is both moral and it's great economics. So let's try it another way. Estimated deficit reduction for fiscal year 24 to 33. So that functionally that 9 fiscal years. We expect federal spending on this is severe obesity, not the mainstream, to be $1,724 billion. And if anyone wants to see this report, once it's officially voted on, then it's a report. This will be on the Republican side of the Joint Economic Committee, Chapter 3. Read it. It's brilliant. $1,724 billion over functionally that 10-year cycle. Just for severely obese populations, and these are for Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Services, veterans, on taking care of our brothers and sisters because the illnesses that come with this. You would have to increase the top tax rate to 49% to raise the same amount of money as getting rid of severe, we're not talking obesity, just the severe obesity. Remember last week I brought the charts on how it's rated. One disease that we are told that of the 4 100,000 human conditions, illnesses, misery. Half of them are related to obesity. Are we willing to talk about it as we do the farm legislation? Are we willing to talk about it with some of the new technologies, and I'm going to touch on these, that are available to us? Are we willing to talk about it just on what's happening on how much of prime age working males are not in the labor force? And the number one thing we're seeing actually isn't substance abuse. It's close. It's actually health related to obesity. So let's try another one here. Let's see if I can make myself a complete pariah around here from telling the truth on the math. Estimated deficit reduction for 2023. Projected federal spending on severe obesity. This is just that very top threshold. This budget year will be $115 billion. And this is, once again, just in Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Services, veterans. Democrats would have to raise the top tax rate to 47% just to raise the amount of money just this population costs. Am I at least making a point here that the discussion saying, just raise taxes, that takes care of it? Because remember, the last 12 months, what do we borrow per second over the last 12 months? $63,000 every second is what we've borrowed over the last 12 months. Okay, one more of these. Estimated deficit reduction between 24 and 33. Estimated deficit reduction. Projected federal spending on all obesity-related illnesses. Now remember, this is a static number. There's also, we estimate, about another $1.5 trillion that you would gain in productivity because these populations can actually come back and participate in the society. But over that time, it's over $4 trillion is what our government will spend. Now add another $1.5 trillion on the economic vitality you gain. You would actually have to have a marginal tax rate for the top earners in this country of 65% to come close to covering that cost. And that's for one illness. Now, it's the illness that is the most expensive in our society because it's related into diabetes and kidney failure and heart attacks and everything else. But am I sort of making the point? Because we're seeing over $4 trillion just in the disease, and the Biden tax proposal produces $375 billion over the 10 years. For those of you who are not really good at math, $375 billion is a hell of a lot less than $4 trillion. And this is the lunacy here, where the theater is so much more important than the reality of the math. So let's actually walk through this. Joint Economic Committee Republicans estimate the cost of obesity over the 10 years. So the 10 years we're about to start the budget cycle on is $5.6 trillion. If you want to start to stabilize debt to GDP, can we at least have a conversation about this? When you start to see the mortality statistics in this country, the number of working age people, people who should be actually living their lives, who are dying, and they're dying early. I'm going to show you a chart in a little bit of our young people and what's going on there. The game of avoiding this discussion needs to come to an end because the economics and the morality of it are here. So let's pull our heads out. Let's actually time to actually have that difficult conversation. So let's do the next one. This one is really interesting. Estimated economic cost. This is actually $2.6 trillion of growth in the GDP. This isn't spending. I just showed you a few $1 trillion of spending. This would be actual growth in the size of the economy and participation because our brothers and sisters actually are not sick. Their ability to come back and be part of society. $2.6 trillion over that 10 years. We worked hard on this math. We spent months vetting it, and I will argue it's incredibly conservative math. So, let's have a little more fun here. Okay, maybe you just don't care. Maybe you're one of these people that sends in things to my office and all you care about is you want more money for something. Fine. Do you at least care about your kids, your grandkids? I have 2 young kids, and I look around and I'm terrified what I see. But we're actually looking at the growth of obesity amongst our kids. Do you understand what happens to their life expectancy, their ability to participate in their society when you start to see numbers growing like this? We're actually starting to see a world where at the end of this decade, 12% of our children will be morbidly obese. Uncomfortable to say, but that's the math. But in 10 years, half of our kids are technically. Is this moral? Should we not talk about it? Because it's going on. This is the math. And understand what it does to the society. An unhealthy society doesn't grow. It doesn't have the economic vitality. And then you start to wonder why all day long our hallways are full of people saying, well, I need you to spend more money on this because we can't find workers. We can't do this. But yet we come back and show data that basically says what? There's like 3.5 million prime-age working males that aren't in the economy. And then the economists come back and do the stats. The demographer comes in and sits there and rattles off the numbers. And we start to realize number one cause wasn't substance abuse, it was obesity. So, am I starting to make a point here? Life expectancy for 18 years old and older by their BMI class. You understand, functioning the last 4 years, life expectancy in the United States has fallen. Is that moral? Does anyone care? Even when you adjust for COVID, our lifespans are falling in this country. Well, it turns out, in digging the number, the primary reason is this. And look, we have this stratified by different ethnicities, different genders. But you start to actually see what we're seeing here in the numbers. When you start seeing some of our populations, that when the life expectancy is 66 years. So, a little while ago, the Congressional Black Caucus took the first hour, and they talked about the morality of their issues. I would argue this is their issue. This is all of our issue. But no one else will talk about it. So, and yes, there is some happy stuff coming. So part of the point I've been trying to make over and over and over, so let's just talk about diabetes. Diabetes, 31% of all Medicare spending is just diabetes. 1 in 4 TRICARE dollars in the United States is just diabetes. 33% of Medicare benefits are spent for folks with diabetes. 67% of the $327 billion spent on diabetes is by government insurance. And that's from way back in 2017, and today it's dramatically higher. But that was the last year we could actually get the number. And 5 of the top 10 Part D drugs. Now this one drives me crazy. So remember, we're having all this debate and all this money. You're spending too much money on pharmaceuticals. These Part D drugs are driving so much of the debt and deficit. Half of those top 10 drugs half of them, half of those Part D drugs are drugs for diabetes. Anyone see sort of the trend here? Am I making sort of a flow of a concept? Is consciousness coming with us? Joint Economic Committee Republicans, Medicare spending will double, functionally being $22 trillion over the next 10 years. I have come here for the last couple years and brought the chart that basically shows over the next 30 years, 100% of the $130 trillion of borrowing, all the borrowing growth. 75% is the shortfall in Medicare, 25% is the shortfall in Social Security if we choose to backfill it. And remember, we're functioning 9 years away from the Social Security Trust Fund being gone. And in that same 10 years, the Transportation Trust Fund's gone, the Medicare Part A Trust Fund is gone. And we dink around with stupid stuff around here, not taking seriously, the wheels are coming off. And it turns out there are some things that are absolutely moral we could be doing, if anyone here actually gave a damn. All right, a couple more of these concepts, and then we're going to do some of the positive side, some of the plan. JEC, Joint Economic Republicans, project annual healthcare costs attributed to severe obesity. Now, this is interesting. This is for the sick person. This is for the person with obesity, severe obesity, not regular, severe. They spend over another $14,000 a year on top of their other healthcare costs. Problem is, a huge portion of this population is also in government-paid-for healthcare. And here's the one that I expect I will get the nasty grams on tomorrow. So yay, let's have at it. Joint Economic Republicans, annual increase of Medicare expenses caused by obesity-related health, $3,500 a year per taxpayer. $3,500 a year per taxpayer is functionally what obesity costs. Okay, that's me sounding like the accountant on steroids. But the math always wins. You know, I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable, well, bless you, but the math always wins. So let's actually come back and say, all right, let's say I've actually convinced someone out there that maybe we should make America healthier and actually have an honest discussion about what's going on, because these numbers have just gone skyrocketing over the last 10 years. So let's talk about a couple things here. This is just another example. I've brought a handful of these. It's a blood glucose monitor you can have in your body. Fairly cheap, fairly this, and incredibly effective in stabilizing someone with type 1 diabetes or pre-diabetic condition. We're about to have a pill for obesity. It's the next generation of, you've been looking at these GLP-1s. It's coming. It's almost through the process. There's a whole series of other categories of weight loss drugs that are coming that are remarkably effective. Studies actually sort of breaking down, it turns out that one of the most moral things we could do is use the technology we have. So if I came to you tomorrow and said, let's do a plan, maybe we should make some changes in the farm legislation. Really hard to do. The lobbyists marching them down the hallways won't be happy with it. It's what we have to deal with. Number two, go back to access for people to be able to manage their blood glucose. Number three, maybe we should start to look at the accessibility for those who are on Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health Service, veterans, who actually really have comorbidities, lots of diseases, substantially because of their weight, because of diabetes. Maybe the moral thing is make these drugs available to them. And then here is part of the Holy Grail I've come back and talked about multiple times, and I've been mocked. Sorry, don't mean to be personalizing it, well, screw it, I do mean to personalizing it. FDA approves first cellular therapy to treat patients with type 1 diabetes. Yes, it's finally one of them, and there's a half a dozen of these that are in their FDA approval stages or tests. But the first one is fully approved now. That therapy can get the body to start producing, accepts a replenishment of islet cells, and islet cells produce insulin. It's here. So do you see the flow? If we actually said we need a healthier society, oh, by the way, it's amazing for what it does in bending the debt curve. Oh, by the way, it's moral. Oh, by the way, it would mean actually populations can come back into society. We might get productivity gains. We have a way to help people manage their pre-diabetic with some technology. We have some ways to help people get their weight down. Oh, by the way, those people who do get their weight down, the 30% or so, that their body is so damaged they can't produce insulin anymore, turns out we can replace their islet cells in their body now. It's here. It's moral, it's optimistic, it's joyful. When was the last time you had an idiot like myself standing here sounding like an accountant on steroids and saying, I actually have a solution. It doesn't solve the whole problem. It only solves a portion of it. But damn it, this would do more than all the jaw moving around here that you've heard so far this year. And it's doable, because is this Republican or Democrat? I will just argue it's the right thing to do. Is this place capable? Is this place capable, Madam Speaker, of actually doing the right thing? Is it capable of doing something? It's also great math. It's morally wonderful, and actually would be really good for everyone. Dear God, I hope so. And with that, thank you for tolerating my tantrum, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.